Despite consistent tournament placements, I feel that Houndoom is still one of the overlooked cards and archetypes of Neo 1. In the Neo block, we had 3 different Houndooms. 2 of them are pretty good. Not only is Revelation Houndoom one of the best looking cards in Neo block, it's also got this self-synergy going where you can attach a fire energy, deal 20 damage with Dark Flame, discard the fire energy, and attach a dark energy from your discard pile. That way you're not having to fully rely on power charge. And then with Black Fang, depending on how many extra darkness energies you have attached to Houndoom, you can potentially deal another 10 damage on top of the extra 10 damage that the energy itself is providing. So if you do hit all 3 coin flips, you can deal 90 damage. But there is quite a bit of work that goes into that. The faster, more efficient alternative is to rely more on Dark Houndoom from Neo Destiny. Less HP, but remember you also have Rocket's Hideout, and Dark Houndoom can still benefit from darkness energies. But in contrast to that Revelation Houndoom, Darkfire is going to be dealing a consistent 60 damage. No coin flips required, but you do have to rely a lot more on power charge to get those darkness energies back. Format-wise, the biggest problem with Dark Houndoom is that it is weak to water, which means that it will get absolutely destroyed by Dark Feraligatr even if you omit babies from the deck. You already know from the name of this deck that Dark Houndoom got some controversial, yet nonetheless helpful assistance from base set Electabuzz, which was reprinted as a best of game promo towards the end of Neon's lifetime. And you may be thinking, well, Electabuzz doesn't help with the 2 main water decks that were big at the time, which were Dark Feraligatr because it's weak to grass, and Kingdra, which has no weakness. But it can still handle those threats very effectively because, like the other 2 Houndooms, this is a 70 HP basic Pokemon that is a great attacker for only 1 or 2 energy. A lot of decks did tech in cards like Mantine for fire decks specifically that is weak to Electabuzz, so this is like a counter to a counter, but other than that, this deck's more about just damage efficiency. So let's just go on and get into the deck list. Starting off with a full playset of Cleffa. For the obvious setup reasons, making sure you get all of your basic setup Pokemon, your Electabuzz, your Houndours, potentially a Pichu, and all of the appropriate support for your matchup. Because not only is this deck very energy efficient as far as damage output goes, it's also pretty versatile within the metagame. So for the Houndour, there are also 3 different Houndours in Neo block to choose from. My favorite is the Neo Discovery one because it leans into that energy efficiency as well. 50 HP is pretty solid for a basic Pokemon that you're going to be evolving up. So that's just why I go with this one. We can explore some of the other Houndours later, but full playset of the Discovery Houndour, going to be using 3 copies of Dark Houndoom, as that is the primary attacker of this deck. That's where your most damage output is going to be coming from. Please ignore the very ugly proxies I had to print out for this card because I had no Dark Houndooms. Because the other Houndoom from Revelation has its own sort of attack efficiency, still going to be running 1 copy of that, especially if you do need that psychic resistance for some reason. That's a pretty easy swap in since a lot of this deck is going to be using Fire Energy, Dark Energy, Rainbow Energy. That way you can kind of switch between these 3 primary attackers and you're not really gonna get energy screwed at any point. 3 copies of Electabuzz, and then we're gonna be rounding out our Pokemon list with 2 copies of Pichu as well for, you know, even more attacking options. So if you actually want to deal some spread damage with Pichu and really punish those decks that rely on Pokemon powers, again, ironically, the one you're going to run into most is actually Dark Feraligatr, which will stop Pichu from attacking at all. So keep in mind that this late into the metagame, most decks were already running counters to Dark Feraligatr because that's what was dominating the format. By the time that the best of show promos were being released, Dark Feraligatr was being much less often. The power of fire had gone up with decks like Macargo. So like I was saying earlier, this deck is really just a counter to the meta counters, but it's still very powerful in its own right. You're going to be running 2 copies of Oracle to help with that top deck consistency, especially when you're relying a lot on Cleffa and draw power like Professor Elm and Copycat. Oracle's just a way to ensure that next turn you are drawing exactly what you need from the top of your deck before you reshuffle your hand in for a Copycat or an Elm. Because you're going to see draw power is extremely important to this deck, as it really helps get your setup. You get the exact energy that you need into your hand so you can start using those 1 energy and 2 energy attacks. Really get the jump on your opponent while they're still setting up. So not only is it a full playset of Elm, 3 copies of Copycat, which is going to be very helpful against your opponent's use of Cleffa, but also a full playset of Bill, which was also reprinted this time in Legendary Collection. Accompanying Bill will be Pokemon Trader, which is another Legendary Collection reprint, which is going to help you switch between your Houndours, Houndooms, Electabuzz, Pichus, whatever you need in the moment. Going back to the thing with Oracle, you really want that consistency. You want to ensure that you're getting the exact cards you need as quickly as possible. You're essentially running one of the most haymakery decks in Neo-On. Full playset of Focus Band for those Cleffas and Pichu, but also toss one onto a Houndour if you're afraid of it getting gusted out when your opponent's got some water types active. Speaking of which, Double Gust is probably the primary way to screw over your opponent's setup, so why not go ahead and throw in an entire playset of Double Gust into this deck. And as you can see, this deck is almost fully search and draw when it comes to its trainer base, because the Pokemon base is so strong with what the deck is actually setting out to do. And the idea is absolutely hit hard and hit fast, because as you can see, there is no power charge in this build. You're not going to be recycling those dark energies any other way other than using that Revelation Houndoom. Instead, what you're going to be doing is running a full playset of Darkness Energy and a full playset of Rainbow Energy, so that you can essentially have 8 accessible Darkness Energies. Although they're not going to provide the extra damage, it's still going to let you get the attack off. Beyond that is gonna be 6 Fire Energy and 3 Lightning Energy. Again, with backup from Rainbow Energy if you absolutely need it. If you can't get the Lightning Energy you need into your hand, or if you're super unlucky and all 3 of them get prized. With this much draw and search, you're not gonna have trouble getting cards out of your deck and into your hand. The trouble is if you have to prolong the game more than 4 or 5 turns, because then that's when this deck really starts to struggle. With Dark Houndoom, you're going to be burning through those Rainbow Energies and those Darkness Energies pretty quick, even though the other Houndoom can benefit from those being in your discard pile. You're not always going to be able to rely on it. So an addition for this deck to kind of help more with consistency is Power Charge. In doing so, you won't have to be as mindful of which energy you are placing where. Alternatively, you also have Porygon 2's Energy Converter power, which can come in useful for any time you're using special energy types. And you could easily replace your Cleffas with a 2-2 line of Porygon 2 just for backup. With as many copies of Copycat and Elm as this deck runs, the Cleffa can be redundant, and so there is some room for changes there. Now with Power Charge and Porygon 2, this is going to slow your deck down a little bit, which goes against the core idea completely. I'm just saying there's some options. If you are going for the slower, more consistent build, I would say that Rocket's Hideout and Goldberry are a must for this deck, just to pump up those Houndooms a little bit, give them a little more HP, and that's going to go for all dark Pokemon. Plus, Goldberry is going to be great for Electabuzz, giving you more time to lay down some damage and potentially paralyze your opponent, which is going to shut down a lot of Pokemon powers. As I mentioned earlier, there are 2 other Houndours that you can use. Plunder and Corner are both useful in their own right, but 40 HP is a little too risky. That's why I much prefer the Fire type 50 HP one. I think its attacks are also more solid. And perhaps one of your most useful additions could potentially be Muck, that was reprinted in Legendary Collection. The reason that Dark Feraligatr didn't see a lot of play by the end of Neo-On was because of Muck. And much like with Pichu, if your deck doesn't utilize Pokemon powers, then there's really no reason you shouldn't include Muck, other than if you hate the card as much as I do. And actually, the version of DoomBuzz that won the 2003 Professor's Cup, as piloted by Eric Richards, up on the screen right now, just in case you're interested in building that exact version. But this was a little more technical, not as fast, but by including Muck in the build, it really went hard into punishing opposing decks that relied on powers. And that is going to be it for DoomBuzz. Let me know what you think of my personal build of this deck. Let me know how you run this deck if you have used it before. Give me all your thoughts down in the comments. As always, thanks for watching. Social media links are down in the description, and I'll see you next video. Bye.